roar that will probably come in. Um, I live here in the suburb of Berkeley. I'm a native of Michigan. I was born and raised in the state of Michigan. I had a very strong conversion experience at the age of 23. And since that time, I have really tried to do things that are pleasing, if you will, to the Creator.
It's funny because you and I, when we talked about doing this, we kind of put together our thoughts of what it is that we really wanted to do. And this is for a younger generation. And since we both have children that are grown, we know that we aren't just speaking to that generation behind us, as in our children, but we're speaking to our grandchildren and their future children. And I've got young people that are meeting tonight to give themselves a platform to say how they'd like to see us change the world. And one of the questions I remember asking you a long time ago, you and I both deal with conflict and conflict resolutions and overcoming what some people call implicit biases, but prejudices and bigotry and racism. And that's been our work for a couple of decades or more.
Yeah.
But we live with this. And my question to you was, why are you doing this? And your response was basically, because we're crazy. And of course, I've become the wacky peacemaker in a lot of ways to satirical talk about anybody who does this work of peacemaking has got to be out of their mind, because no sane person would do what we do. So tell me why you do what you do.
I really do connect what I do to my faith. If I didn't have my faith, I think I'd be gone by now. Or maybe other people would be gone by now. I mean, it's not an easy work, what we do.
No.
Trying to lovingly confront or expose people who are unaware. I mean, perhaps I should say that I work with a predominantly all-white women's Christian organization, and as a result, and actually they asked me to come and teach them what it means to be anti-racist. That was their invitation to me. And I've been doing this work with this organization. It'll be 19 years in January. And I've met with great resistance, but I have also seen transformation take place. So, and I thank God for the transformation, because when eyes are open, when hearts are open, eyes open, and really being able to touch the heart. And I think I have a real entree point with many of the women I work with, because they have a love for God. And I think that's really been helpful to the ability. I'm not speaking to, I'm not spitting in the wind. I'm not hollering, down a tube. I am reaching for the God spirit that's in all of us, that is clearly within them, and wanting that spirit to respond to my efforts. Why I do it? Yeah. That I would just be living up my faith. I kind of gave you more than what you asked for there.
Well, no, because you gave me two aspects. One is resistance for a plethora of reasons, and the other is transformation, which I think is probably our greatest hope in the work that we do, and why we continue to do it, is that we do see change. And while I guess we get a little greedy and we want more change and more people changing, the truth is that we do see a transformation happening in a lot of ways. But we know that the complexities of life throw up those hurdles that even when we accomplish a transformation, there's another hurdle to overcome. Oh, yeah. So I guess what I'd like for us to do at this moment and to share, because we do have this great love for humanity. And both of us come from a faith tradition, and I'm not talking about being Lutheran or even being Christian, but from a faith tradition where you do know and that love and grace and compassion are the greatest tools that we have. So what do we do when we meet resistance? Because tonight might be a night that while everybody seems to be working together, we're going to meet resistance when we start talking about issues like LGBT, or right now people are fighting against the Equal Rights Ordinance because it includes transgender people. We're going to talk about people who have no faith per se, that consider themselves agnostic or atheist, or who are Muslim or other faiths. And politically, let's run the whole gamut, from conservative to liberal, but all of the in-betweens. Those are the complexities and the resistance we run into. And I don't know that I'm asking you to give advice as much as to give the experience, so that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of what we have can be used tonight as well as for the rest of their lives. I know I'm giving you a hard job just now.
Well, let me see if I can kind of sort through, because several things were coming to me while you were talking. One of them is I feel I need to know where I'm coming from. And I'm coming from a faith-based, but that faith says this to me, and that is that God loves the world just as it is, with all of its problems. God loves all people just as we are. And so that's where I come from. That the God I know is a God of love and acceptance. And so then when we getting to know God came after learning biblical texts, because I've seen so much of our problem today with all religions being that people will take certain texts and use them like clubs rather than really get immersed in the spirit of God, which is behind all sacred text, and then letting that spirit indwell. The other thing is, always, I've had to learn how to listen. I've had to learn how to realize that I needed to learn to hear not only what was being said, but what was not being said. We're so quick to force our conversations, and by that I mean we already know what we want to say. We wait for the person who's talking, to finish so we can hurry up and say what we want to say, so we don't really listen to each other. And when we listen to each other, we need to listen to each other in a way that allows for the imagination less and our curiosity more. So that way, to really engage one another. If I think you mean something when you say X, I need to make sure that that's what you mean, and not simply assume that's what you mean.
Ask. That's
yeah.
That's probably one of the hardest things to do, because we're so assured that we heard what was said, and it's kind of like that cartoon. I know you think that you heard what I said, but what I said was not what you heard. And it may be a little bit more complicated than that, but the truth is that we don't actively listen. And I think that maybe I think that over the 19 or 20 years that I've been doing this as well, is that I am better at listening than I was before. I mean, even in our conversations on paper and with each other over the years, I think that I have heard more or clearer today than I did 16 years ago, for instance, that I hear you better.
I think we're more concerned about being right. It reminds me of the St. Francis prayer where it says, Lord, let me seek to understand more than being understood. Um, to want to hold the other person lightly and also hold my opinions lightly enough to be able to be swayed. I don't want to die with certain arguments. I want to die knowing that I've contributed some healing to this place, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense because I tell people all the time, I used to plan for a year or for two, and now I am thinking in terms of what will the world look like 60 years from now, with me and without me. And that once I get a feel for what it will look like without me, I have a little bit of hope because I think I've done better listening.
I agree. I think one of the things that I've also learned is how to meet people where they are. If I could tell you a quick story, for the first, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years of working with women's organization, because I actually started doing this work in '91. Then it was called anti-bias. But anyway, I was always greeted with a compliment. They thought it was a compliment where they would say to me, Inez, when I look at you, I don't see your color. I just see a child of God. It drove me nuts. No matter how many times I tried to explain, well, if you don't see my color, you really aren't seeing me. Or would come from the angle of, well, do you drive? And when you drive, do you notice the red light and the green light and the amber light? I mean, so you do see color, because there is such a thing as color blindness. I just want to make sure. And then one day, and I prayed, this was a matter of prayer. And one day a dear woman said this to me, and I was doing a training outside of Seattle, Washington. And I walked out. My partner knew this was one of my hot button issues, and so I called a break. She called time out, and I went out and I prayed. And what was most frustrating is I didn't know how to reach these women who did say these kinds of things who said exactly that, not these kind of things, but exactly that to me. And I got it, and I found her, and I'll call her Marie, during break, and I asked Marie, were you ever in a situation where you were the first woman to do anything in your life, or in your church life, or what have you? And she just lit up like candles, and she said, "Oh yes, I was the first woman elected to the board of elders," and you could just tell, you could feel the energy come off her. And I said, "Wonderful, that must have been really great." She said, what an experience. It was really a learning experience, and so forth. And I said to her, "Well, tell me, if one of the men on that council board of elders had turned to you and said, 'Marie, when I see you, I don't see a woman,' would you take that as a compliment?" I know. As soon as I said that, the color drained from her face, her rosiness disappeared. She was white as a sheet, and her eyes pooled up with tears.
She got it.
She got it. And that's when we embraced, and she apologized, and I said, "Oh, it's okay, baby. Your apology is accepted." And then I said, "Can I share our experience with the group?" And Marie said yes, and I did. And I used Marie's story over and over to illustrate how listening close enough to who we're speaking to helps us understand who they are and from where they are coming. And then we can find that which correlates to what we want to bring them.
I'm always talking about false equivalencies. When somebody takes an idea like Black Lives Matter and says, well, all lives matter. And that somehow Black Lives Matter negates that all lives matter, rather than
somehow Black lives have always mattered.
Right. And the fact that all lives matter when all lives do, and they don't always.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I think that what you demonstrated in that particular story more than anything was you found the equivalency of something that got the person to see beyond what their own opinion was, number one. I tell people sometimes you need to watch A Time to Kill. The conversation between Matthew McConaughey's character and Samuel Jackson's character. But we're friends. Real life.
Yeah. I'm outside.
Right. But we're friends. And have you ever been to my house? Do you know how many children I have? What do you know about me that demonstrates that we have a relationship beyond when you just see me? And I think that is one of the hardest parts for me, is that I have been in relationship with a lot of people across the planet, but right here in my own church, in my own hometown, and realize that I really don't have that developed relationship that allows us to see one another. And it's important to be seen. It's important to be seen. Monday, I was talking with a guy whose first language was not Spanish, and that is my small percentage of a second language. And I didn't think he understood me. And so at one point he asked me, because we were talking about language, he asked me what was my language. What was my first language? Mm-hmm. Of course, my first language was English, right? Mm-hmm. But then it hit me, Inez, that what he was asking for was something about myself that I did not know. I did not know my ancestors' language or what part of the world I came from. Mm-hmm. And I also didn't realize how much I'd like to, because he finally asked the question that made me think about more than just us trying to get across the language barrier between the two of us. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. You know, I was reading what you said. I asked you, what do we do? And you said magic. And
yeah, there's some of that in there. There is some of that in there.
Yeah, I remember I asked this question from my friend who is Wicca. What's the equivalent of prayer? And she said, I don't know, requesting. And she said, what did you think it would be? And I told her, magic. That I thought it would be magic. And that was the beginning of asking kind of the right questions, Inez. And I think that that's what you want to do more than anything. The second question was, how do we make sense of why we do it? And your response was, well, it's needed. And if we had to think about, is that need ever met? I think that when we talk about this next generation or the next generations, the ones behind us, that's the part that I want to see people embrace. What is needed, not what you want, but what is needed. I think that that's an important direction, if you will, for what I wanted to say to this group of young people.
That's powerful. That is powerful, to distinguish, to see myself as part of the community rather than an individual. And of course, this is very countercultural because we live in a world, a country filled with mythology, and these different mythologies encourage us to believe that which isn't real or true. So we're not, you know, rather than looking for the next best thing, rather than caring what this year's color or style or whatever, you know, may be, to ask what is needed in this world. And what we need in this world is we need human beings that practice compassion, that know how to show mercy, and that see that those two things, those two practices, as part, as core to what defines them as human beings. You just went quiet. Did you say anything?
Oh, I did, but you didn't hear me. What I was
No.
gonna say is I think I'm gonna leave it there, because what you are saying to me right now is, I guess, the advice, if there's any such thing as advice. But it's also what I think our calling is, to give the next generation, that they don't forget this,
Oh,
that it's
please, yes.
important not to forget that our motivations and our intentions can be many and they can be complicated, but in the end, it's about the human experience to acknowledge and value the next human being. Like I do you, like you do me. I mean, I know where to go when I need to feel loved. I call me some Inez or some Angela, you know, or some Rahima. I call on those that I know see me. My color, my height, my gray hair. And by the way, I think we're about even now.
Yeah, yeah. Look at us. We're twins. Yeah. Look at our hair. Yeah. Our gray is pretty consistent.
Yeah.
I love it.
I do too. I do too. And I want you to give my best to your family. Tell them that I'm coming to Chicago again, so that we'll figure out a way to spend some time, more time than just a phone call.
Well, we have a guest room, and you're welcome to stay here as long as you want.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Be careful what you ask for.
Oh, you know, I'm not worried. Okay. It's really good to see you. Take care of yourself.
Good to see you. This is Inez Torres Davis and PK McCary signing out. Love you.
Love you too.